Agreed to meet them, but not alone. Marcus suggested a public restaurant near his office. Neutral territory, cameras, witnesses. He'd sit with us, not to intimidate anyone, but to keep things grounded in reality. Michael and Ginny arrived first. They looked wrecked. Michael couldn't sit still. Ginny had a bruise on her arm she kept trying to hide with her sleeve. That alone told me more than words ever could. Marcus introduced himself calmly. I'm Emma's attorney. Michael flinched. Then the truth started spilling out. My parents had been living off Michael for years, moving in and out, borrowing money for emergencies that never ended. Criticizing his parenting while depending on him financially. Controlling him the same way they'd always controlled me, through guilt, fear, and obligation. When Jin confronted them about abandoning me, my dad had grabbed her arm hard enough to leave marks. Michael had finally kicked them out. Now they were staying in a motel, calling constantly, showing up at his work, threatening, pressuring, demanding loyalty. Marcus asked precise questions about bank accounts, passwords, spare keys, legal ties. My parents were still on Michael's mortgage, still had access to his finances, still had keys to his house. By the time the coffee went cold, it was obvious. This wasn't just a family conflict, it was abuse. Marcus told them to change everything immediately, locks, passwords, accounts, gave them a colleague's card to start the process of separating legally. As we stood to leave, Michael hugged me. This time I hugged him back, not forgiveness. Not yet, but recognition. That night, my phone lit up with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Accusations, threats, guilt-soaked rants. I blocked them all. Then I called Ginny. They're safe, she said. We changed the locks. Stayed with friends. I finally slept. Until morning, Jin called screaming. They broke into our house. They'd taken baby photos, important documents, Michael's laptop, and left a note. Family matters should stay in the family. Told her to call the police immediately. Said I was coming over. When I arrived, the house was chaos. Drawers ripped open. Papers everywhere. Michael sat on the couch with his head in his hands. Jin pointed out missing items to an officer who looked skeptical. Are you sure this wasn't a misunderstanding? He asked. Maybe they used a spare key? Jenny showed him her bruised arm. Officer took notes, but I could tell he didn't fully believe us. After they left, Marcus arrived. This changes everything, he said grimly. Breaking and entering is a serious crime. He told us to document everything. Stay somewhere else, to file emergency restraining orders in the morning. As we were leaving, Michael's phone buzzed. Text from my dad, just 3 words, we're watching you. Michael's hands were shaking when he showed it to me. Took a screenshot, sent it to Marcus. Then I made a decision. You're coming with me, I said, all of you. Because whatever this was becoming, I knew one thing for sure, it wasn't over yet. Portland should have felt safe. Rachel's apartment smelled like coffee and clean laundry, familiar, grounding. She hugged me so tight my knees almost buckled, and for the first time in days I let myself breathe. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to play devil's advocate. When I finished, she poured me a glass of wine and said the words I didn't know I needed to hear. They don't deserve access to you. It felt good to have someone so firmly on my side. Sunday night, an email came from my dad. My mom was stable. Stent placed. She'd be released Tuesday. The last line made my skin crawl. She's asking for you. Don't you think you punished us enough? Rachel read it and scoffed. But guilt tripping. I knew she was right, but guilt isn't logical. It seeps into the cracks you didn't know were still open. I flew home Monday morning. When I reached my apartment, there were flowers outside my door. No apology, no respect for boundaries, just a card. Please call us. We're staying nearby. I threw them down the trash chute. Tuesday morning, a text came from an unknown number. A photo of my mother in a hospital bed, pale. Small, she may not have much time left. Do you want to live with this regret? I blocked the number and called Melissa. She suggested changing my number, taking a break from social media, staying with a friend for a while. I agreed. And my doorman called again. There's a young woman downstairs, he said. She has a small child, says she's your sister-in-law. My stomach flipped. These people would not stop. I told him to send her up. The woman who knocked on my door looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, a sleeping toddler slung over her shoulder. I'm Jenny, she said quietly, Michael's wife. I let her in reluctantly. She set her daughter on my couch and sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a glass of water. I only learned about you 3 years ago, she said. They told me you ran away. Then she looked at me and swallowed hard. In your podcast, that's when Michael finally told me the truth. She wasn't there to ask for money, she was there to confess. She told me my parents had been telling everyone I'd abandoned them, that I was unstable, that I'd stolen money. That they'd spent years searching for me. All lies. She showed me the posts, years old, carefully crafted, painting them as victims. I felt sick. They're desperate now, Jenny said. Because their story is falling apart. Before she left, she looked me straight in the eye. I want my children to know their aunt, she said, but only if you want that, no pressure. After the door closed, I sat alone for hours. Then an email came from my dad, angry, threatening. He said they'd sue me for defamation, said they'd go to the media, said I owed them compensation. I forwarded it to Melissa, then to my lawyer. Marcus called immediately. This is empty posturing, he said. Save everything, don't respond. But before I could feel relief, Michael called, panicked. They're furious Jenny talked to you, he said. I'm scared they're going to do something desperate. And suddenly, fear took on a whole new shape. Pounding on my door wasn't polite, it wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of knocking that assumes ownership, like whoever's on the other side believes they have every right to be there. I lay frozen in bed, heart slamming against my ribs. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it could be a neighbor, a mistake, anyone but them. Then my mom's voice came through the door. Emma, please, my stomach dropped. We just want to talk, she said softly, like she hadn't abandoned me, like she hadn't ignored 12 years of silence. Like she wasn't standing in my hallway uninvited. My dad joined in. We know you're in there. I didn't move. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to make myself smaller. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against the carpet. They knocked again. Louder. We love you, my mom said. That word felt grotesque coming from her mouth. I stayed silent. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the hallway went quiet. I waited another 10 before standing, carefully checking the peephole. They were gone. I called building security immediately. Told them not to let those people upstairs again. The guard asked if I needed police. No, I said, just don't let them in. Then I called Melissa. She came over during her lunch break, sat with me while I cried, brought me a sandwich I barely touched. She reminded me that showing up unannounced wasn't reconciliation, it was harassment, that I had every right to say no. I believed her, until the next message came, an email from Michael, furious, accusing. He said I'd humiliated our parents, said they were staying in a cheap motel they couldn't afford just to be close to me, said his wife needed surgery and they were hoping I could help. I didn't respond. The next morning, I decided to leave town. I booked a flight to Portland to stay with Rachel, the friend who'd let me sleep on her couch when I was 17, the one person who'd seen me at my lowest and never asked for anything in return. I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when my phone rang. Unknown number. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, my doorman called. There's a woman downstairs, he said hesitantly. She looks unwell, says she's your mother. My chest tightened. Told him to call an ambulance if she needed help, but I wasn't coming down. An hour later, I passed through the lobby on my way out. No sign of them. The doorman told me the ambulance had taken her to Memorial Hospital for chest pains. Nodded and left. At the airport, my phone rang again. Michael, I answered this time. Mom had a heart attack, he sobbed. She's in surgery. This is your fault for stressing her out. I hung up, called Melissa instead. She was firm. You are not responsible for her health. This feels like manipulation. Get on the plane. I did. But even as the plane lifted off, a horrible thought clawed at me. If they were willing to use illness to control me, what else were they capable of? My father's email didn't start with an apology. It started with excuses. Paragraph after paragraph about how hard their lives had been. Failed businesses, medical bills, bad luck, sacrifices they'd made. Not once did he mention abandoning me. Not once did he ask how I'd survived. Then, at the very end, like an afterthought, came the real reason. He asked if I could help the family financially. I stared at the screen, feeling something inside me finally snap in place. There it was, the confirmation I didn't want but needed. I forwarded the email to Melissa with one sentence in the subject line. And there it is, she called me immediately, even though it was a Sunday. We talked for an hour about boundaries, about the difference between forgiveness and access, about how guilt can masquerade as responsibility. She reminded me that compassion didn't require self-sacrifice. By Monday morning, I'd made my decision. I emailed Michael. I told him I was glad we'd met, that I understood he'd been young, that I was open to having a relationship with him and his family, but there were conditions: no money, no loans, no financial support ever, and no relationship with our parents until they took full responsibility for what they'd done. His response came fast, too fast. I'm really disappointed, he wrote. Our parents need help, family supports each other. You're being selfish with your success. Every guilt button they'd installed in me as a child lit up at once. Didn't respond. Instead, I booked a vacation to Bali and scheduled an extra therapy session. 3 days later, Michael left a voicemail apologizing, said he understood, said he wanted a relationship on my terms. Wasn't sure if he meant it or if he was adjusting tactics. I went to Bali anyway. The distance helped: beaches, rice fields, silence, space to breathe. But when I got back, the messages were waiting. 6 emails from my dad. Each more desperate than the last. I didn't read them. Then Michael texted asking to talk. We agreed to a call. At first, it was normal apologies, small talk. He told me he'd started therapy. He sounded different, less defensive. And he mentioned our parents were visiting him soon. Asked if I'd consider meeting them. Just an hour, public place. My chest tightened. I'm not ready, I said. He pushed slightly, then backed off. That night, I called Melissa. She helped me see the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't afraid of them because I hated them. I was afraid because part of me still wanted their approval, still wanted to be enough. The next day, Michael texted again. And my mom had cried all night, said my dad was talking about driving to my city anyway. Panic set in. I blocked his number. Told my assistant I was working from home for the week. Then my doorman called. There's a couple downstairs asking for you, he said. Won't give their names. I knew instantly. 5 minutes later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my father. Drove 8 hours to see you, he said angrily. You're being childish. The next morning, someone pounded on my door. Didn't respond right away. Not to my brother, not to my mother. I needed time to sit with what I'd just learned, because once you recognize manipulation, you can't unsee it. Every word they'd written suddenly felt different, carefully chosen, strategically vague. A week passed, then my mom emailed again. This time she attached photos, pictures of me as a baby, me at the beach, no older than 5. Ian Michael building a snowman, cheeks red, smiling like everything was normal. The images felt foreign, like proof of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. At the bottom of the email she wrote, we made mistakes. I want to make amends, no specifics, no accountability, just enough emotion to soften the edges. I brought everything to Melissa. She listened quietly, then reminded me of something important. I was in control. Didn't owe them forgiveness, money, or access to my life. But she also said closure could take many forms: reconciliation, distance, or a final goodbye. What mattered was choosing intentionally. I decided to meet my brother, just him. No parents, we chose a coffee shop in Chicago, halfway between where we lived. Neutral ground, public safe. The morning of the meeting, I nearly canceled 3 times, but at 2 p.m. I walked in. I spotted him immediately. He looked older, heavier. His hairline was receding, but his eyes were the same. He stood when he saw me, awkward and uncertain. We didn't hug. We sat across from each other like strangers. The first 20 minutes were painful, weathered traffic. Flights, nothing real. Then his voice cracked. I'm so sorry, he said. I was just a kid. I studied his face, searching for signs of deception. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for 12 years. Me, he looked down at his coffee. They always thought you were the strong one, he said. The independent one. They believed you'd be fine on your own. It was absurd, insulting. I told him about the storage unit. About eating peanut butter for weeks, about showering at the YMCA, about working night shifts at 17 just to survive. His face collapsed. They told me you chose to stay behind, he whispered, that you had a plan. That you wanted space from the family. All lies. By the end of the meeting, I didn't know what to think. He seemed genuinely remorseful. He talked about his wife and daughter, asked about my work, never directly asked for money. When we parted, he hugged me. I didn't hug back. That night, my mom called. I hadn't given her my number. Michael must have. I answered out of curiosity. She cried, told me how proud she was, how she'd always known I'd succeed. Then I asked her the same question. Why me? Her answer was different. We were in debt, she said. We couldn't afford 3 mouths to feed. We thought you'd manage. Maybe social services would place you with a better family. I hung up. Locked her number, threw my phone across the room. And before I could catch my breath, another message arrived from my father, the first contact in 12 years. Success is supposed to feel safe. For me, it didn't. When my bank balance finally crossed into 7 figures, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell anyone except my therapist. I sat on my apartment floor and cried, not from joy, but from relief. I'd finally built something no one could take away from me, or so I thought. A podcast interview changed everything. I'd been invited to talk about resilience, about surviving family estrangement and building a life from nothing. I almost said no. I didn't want to reopen old wounds, but something inside me felt ready. Like maybe my story could help someone else who felt as alone as I once did. The episode went live on a Tuesday. By Friday, it had over 1 million views. My inbox exploded. Messages from strangers all over the world. People thanking me, people telling me they'd never heard their pain described so clearly. People saying my words helped them feel less broken. Then I saw one subject line that made my stomach drop. You're still our daughter. It was from my mother. No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a paragraph about how she'd heard my side, how maybe we could talk, how time had passed and wounds should heal. It felt cold. Clinical, like an HR email from someone I barely knew. Then another message came in. This one was shorter. We miss you. Can we fix this? My brother Michael. I stared at my laptop for a long time before closing it. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing like I was 17 again, standing in an empty house with that note on the counter. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to scream. They did 12 years of silence. 12 years of not knowing if I was alive or dead. And now that my story was public, now that I was successful, they wanted back in. I didn't respond right away. My therapist, Melissa, told me to wait. Give yourself space, she said. You don't owe anyone an immediate answer, especially not people who abandoned you. So I tried to live normally. I worked, went to the gym, had dinner with friends, but those emails followed me everywhere. Kept opening them, reading them, closing them again. My mom's message felt distant, almost rehearsed. My brother's felt different, less polished, more human. After 10 days, I replied to him, just one sentence. It's been 12 years. What changed? I hit send before I could overthink it. His response came within an hour. He said the podcast made him realize what they'd done. Said he'd been young, said he didn't have a choice, said he'd thought about me often. And seeing me succeed made him proud. Proud, the word landed wrong. If he cared so much, why wait until now? I asked him exactly that. His next email was longer, more detailed. He admitted money had been tight. Our parents' business had failed, his wife was pregnant, medical bills were piling up, and suddenly the truth slipped through the cracks. I felt my stomach sink. This wasn't about reconnection, it was about need. And that realization changed everything. Survival doesn't happen all at once. It comes in tiny, humiliating adjustments you never imagined you'd have to make, like learning how to be invisible. I learned which hours the storage facility was least monitored. I memorized the rhythm of the security guard's rounds. I learned how to fold myself between boxes so my back wouldn't cramp too badly. I learned that hunger doesn't actually disappear, you just get better at ignoring it. Every morning I washed up at the YMCA like I belonged there. I smiled at the front desk, nodded at strangers, pretended I had somewhere to go afterward. Then I went to the public library. Those computers became my lifeline. Applied for every job I could find, restaurants, retail, janitorial work, anything that didn't ask too many questions. I learned how to word things carefully, how to sound confident without lying outright, how to pretend I wasn't terrified every second of the day. When the diner hired me, it felt like winning the lottery. Night shifts, grease-stained floors, screaming cooks, customers who thought snapping their fingers was acceptable behavior. Didn't care, I showed up early, stayed late, took every shift they'd give me. The manager didn't smile much, but she noticed effort. When I told her I didn't have an ID yet, she didn't ask why. Just paid me cash and told me to keep my head down. That kindness saved my life. I bought a prepaid phone, a cheap one, no contract, no name attached. I saved every receipt in a shoebox like it was evidence of my existence. Watched free YouTube videos at night, budgeting, finance, goal setting. I didn't understand half of it, but I watched anyway. The first year wasn't living, it was surviving in slow motion. But somewhere between exhaustion and desperation, something shifted. I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me. I stopped hoping my family would come back. They weren't coming. And oddly, that realization gave me strength. One night, a regular at the diner stayed late. He noticed how I worked, how I memorized orders, how I cleaned while waiting, how I never complained. He asked if I wanted a temporary job cleaning out old office files. Paid 3 times what I made serving. I said yes before he finished the sentence. That job led to another, and another. I asked questions, took notes, learned fast. I showed up early and left last. 22, I was freelancing full-time. By 25, I had my own consulting business, just me, a folding table, and a borrowed laptop. By 27, I had contractors working under me, an office. Clients I used to dream about, and at 29, I hit 7 figures. Not fake money, not influencer money, real savings, retirement accounts, no debt. I cried when I saw the number. Not because of the money, but because I'd done it alone. 12 years passed. Not once did my parents reach out. Not once did my brother check on me. I thought they were gone forever. I was wrong. Because the moment the world finally saw me succeed, that's when my inbox lit up, and everything I thought I'd escaped came rushing back. I was 17 when my life ended quietly. No yelling, no warning, just silence and a single sentence waiting for me on the kitchen counter. You'll figure it out. I still remember how the house felt when I walked in that afternoon. Quiet, no TV noise, no slammed doors, no smell of dinner. Every room looked the same, but something was wrong. The air itself felt abandoned. My parents' shoes were gone. My brother's backpack was missing. Their phones went straight to voicemail. First, I thought it was a prank, a sick one, but still temporary. I waited. An hour passed, then 2. By nightfall, it hit me. They were gone. No goodbye, no explanation, no forwarding address, just that sentence. Cold, casual, final. Replayed every argument I'd ever had, every moment I might have messed up, trying to understand what I'd done to deserve this. But deep down, I already knew the truth. They didn't leave because I failed them. They left because they never cared enough to stay. Looking back, the signs were always there. When I was 13, I baked my mom a birthday cake by myself. I stayed up late watching tutorials, measuring everything carefully. When she tasted it, she laughed and said it was clumpy, then walked away. At 15, I stayed up nights tutoring my brother so he could pass his finals. He called me a know-it-all and slammed his door in my face. At 16, I handed my entire paycheck to my dad so he could cover bills. Months later, when I asked about it, he called me useless. I was always useful, just never loved. A week after they vanished, the landlord showed up. That's how I learned they'd moved 2 states away. They'd canceled the lease early. I had 7 days to get out, 7 days to become homeless. I slept on friends' couches until the invitations quietly stopped. Then I rented a small storage unit with the last of my money. I slept between boxes, sneaking in late and leaving before sunrise. I showered at the YMCA, ate peanut butter straight from the jar. Applied for jobs on library computers and smiled like everything was fine. Eventually, a diner hired me for night shifts. The manager was rough but fair, paid me in cash until I could get an ID. Once when I nearly collapsed from exhaustion, she let me sleep in the break room. I survived, barely, but I didn't know then that this was just the beginning, that 12 years later, the people who abandoned me would come back, not with apologies, but with expectations. And when they did, I'd have to decide whether healing meant opening the door again, or finally locking it forever.